Okay, live from an occupied nation's capital. It's day 49 of the occupation. We had Matt Gaetz in here, Congressman Gaetz today, talking about when they're going to release information about this occupation. He said the information he's seen does not lead to having 5,000 to 7,000 combat troops, National Guard troops, up-armored in what looks like Kabul with the wire razor, barbed wire, and the fencing, the wall. You're in the war room. It's Thursday, 25th of February, year of our Lord 2021, now with over almost 38 million downloads. On the podcast, we're going to tell you how you get to that and how you help us in that downloading and being a force multiplier. John Fredericks Radio Network, Real America's Voice, the streaming service of the Trump Revolution. It is Dish Channel 219, Comcast Channel 113. Of course, we're on Rumble, Telegram, Gab, Roku, Pluto, and translated into Mandarin on G News and GTV, and blown through the firewall to all our compatriots, Lao Beijing in mainland China, and of course the diaspora throughout the world. This is our continual CPAC coverage. Real America's Voice got a massive team down there, headed up by Tudor Dixon and Amanda Head. I want to now go to Amanda live in Orlando, Florida. Amanda, put us in the room. Give us a sense. It looks spectacular. The shot's amazing. Compliments to the guys in Denver and also the field army you've got down there. What is going on? Walk us through the preliminaries. This is the night before. People are checking in. Tomorrow it starts. What's happening in happening in Orlando?
Yeah, so to set the room for you, this is a little bit smaller venue than what we're used to at Oxon Hill every year for CPAC. I think that they did a great job figuring out how to do this on a slightly truncated level. As you can see, the main stage behind me, speakers will get going tomorrow morning. Big speakers, of course, ending with the finale with President Trump on Sunday. But you'll see that I don't have a mask on, but I'm one of the very few people because they do have mask mandates in place for this entire facility. They are doing COVID screenings, so you can either do it in person when you get here, answer those normal, standard questions. Do you have a cough or a temperature? Have you had a positive COVID test? Have you been in contact with anyone? It remains to be seen how strict they are going to be about the mask mandate. And of course, that will determine what the mainstream media's narrative is about this event. But it's going to be a zoo starting tomorrow. It's not crazy right now, but I think that that's a tech hiccup because when I went to sign in for my badge, their internet was down, so they couldn't print anyone's badges. So it's actually very slow right now. Usually people on this first day, they kind of like to get the lay of the land, walk along the booths, see who's here, see who's a sponsor, pick up that list of speakers so they can make sure to show up to all of the proper places for the speakers that they want to hear.
Have my wingman, Raheem Kassam's in studio with us right off of his hot podcast. Also, we're honored to be joined. Our co-host today in studio is the former acting Undersecretary of Commerce for Wilbur Ross. It's Corey Stewart. We're going to get to this big controversy over AT&T, exploding story on with Tucker Carlson last night. We'll pick it up from there shortly. We've also got Boris Epshteyn and Peter Navarro all coming in, and Drew Mason later in the show. Amanda, I got to go back to this. Are people prepared, or is the posse coming down there? Because this is hardcore MAGA now at CPAC. It's a populist nationalist gathering. Nikki Haley is in the Hill. The lead story this afternoon, Nikki Haley was whining she didn't get an invite. Liz Cheney, not invited. These establishment figures not invited. This is pure MAGA. Is pure MAGA ready to understand they're going to have a mask mandate and they're going to have they have to take a COVID test or at least take a temperature check before they go in? And the mainstream media is going to be all over. I mean, the first story we're going to have is Amanda Head was in the war room. First thing she did, she didn't have a mask on. Right, so is hardcore MAGA Nation, are they ready to wear masks?
I'm not. I came from California expecting to have a few days where I could be maskless. People are coming to Florida expecting for it to feel free and open, but I will let you know, we are in Orange County, and Orange County's mayor, after Ron DeSantis lifted the very, very stringent COVID measures, there are a few counties like Orange County who kept those measures in place because they didn't feel comfortable lifting them. I think that people are going to come here. They're going to be very disappointed because they are going to expect CPAC, the C in CPAC for conservative, to actually feel like the proper venue for that. And you have a lot of people who, and there are plenty of studies who back this up, that, it's negligible on whether masks really matter. And you're going to be in close quarters with people anyway. We've all been in scenarios on airplanes where you're packed in like sardines, and then they tell you to socially distance when you're getting off the plane. So a lot of people coming to this, they're hoping to not wear masks, and I think it's going to be a rude awakening. But again, I wonder how strict they are going to be about it. There aren't very many people here just yet. So tomorrow I will have an update for you, and we'll determine how strictly they are adhering to this.
So this kicks off tomorrow morning with Ron DeSantis, the great governor of Florida. He actually gives the welcoming. He's the initial welcoming. You got a great list of speakers. I guess Kristi Noem on Saturday before the Reagan dinner. You got great speakers at the Reagan dinner, of course, capped by the President of the United States in this speech at 3:30. Real America's Voice, The War Room, John Fredericks. We're all going to be putting on a special starting at 2 o'clock on Sunday. An hour and a half pregame to his speech. Speech should last about an hour. We'll be doing a postgame after that. Real America's Voice. I think it's got 20 people down there to bring you tremendous coverage. Raheem, you got anything for Amanda before we let her go?
Well, I think it'll be interesting, and we look forward to your reporting on this, Amanda, about what the response to the president's speech is going to be on Sunday, because Jen Psaki's been asked now, I think, 3 days in a row, whether or not she thinks that it's appropriate for President Trump to speak at CPAC, what she thinks he's going to say. Today it was a more specific question about the immigration portion of it, which is, I think, expected to make up the majority of it. Amanda, is there anything else that you're hearing about what President Trump may remark upon, any announcements he's going to make on the day, and what are you getting from the audience about what they hope to hear?
I think that people are a lot more excited to come to this now that they know that President Trump is speaking. As to the first part of your question, I'll have to circle back to you on that one. Why does it really matter what Jen Psaki thinks about President Trump coming to speak? But, with respect to what you were talking about, Steve, Nikki Haley, this establishment arm, I will say, coming from California, we do have 3 Republicans who a lot of people put in that camp: Devin Nunes, Kevin McCarthy, and Darrell Issa. So there is still a small contingent of people who the attendees here are going to be very dubious about.
Well, you're recalling out there. But by the way, I love Amanda. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were Miss Auburn. I know you went to Auburn. A girl from Alabama. All of a sudden, hey, I'm from California, and all of my California. So listen, Amanda Head and Tudor Dixon are anchoring the coverage.
I live in California. I'm not from there.
Got it. Okay, Amanda Head, Tudor Dixon are anchoring the coverage of Real America's Voice. You don't want to turn the channel because it's going to be wall to wall. This is really 30 days into the Biden administration. The MAGA populist nationalist movement under President Trump is saying, hey, we're throwing down hard. We're going to contest everything you're doing. We are the resistance. President Trump showing up Sunday. It's going to be epic. Amanda, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you and Tudor tomorrow on our morning show. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Looking forward to it.
Okay, right before I go to Boris, I got to ask you, and Corey, jump in here because you ran for governor. Hey, this is the mask mandate ain't going to sit well with the folks showing up for this, right? They're this, and of course the mainstream media you're going to have BBC, you've got the New York Times, you're going to have the Washington Post, got 10 guys there. Josh is all running around. You're going to have nothing but the picture's going to be another group of barbarians, right, in a super spreader event, another super spreader event.
I completely agree. I think that the MAGA movement, the conservatives, they see the mask as really kind of a constraint. They see it as a symbol, really, of all the rights that have been suspended in this country. They see it as a kind of a symbol of everything that the left has done, not just the left, but the establishment right. The Republican Party too, curtailing our rights and restraining our freedoms. And I think that they're going to respond very negatively.
I thought this was DeSantis, why he's the rock star. DeSantis, I thought, outlawed all this stuff.
Well, I think on big private campuses like a hotel thing, I think it's up to them. It's up to the hotel how much they police this stuff. But it's interesting because CPAC, they will have loads of cameras there. It's the event that the media especially goes to try and play gotcha with conservatives. But CPAC always historically treated establishment corporate media outlets better than they've treated conservative news media outlets. I mean, I still remember when Laura Loomer was kicked out of the green room at CPAC. And so you have to take the rough with the smooth. If you're going to lay the red carpet out for the corporate media because you want the coverage, and that's fine, that's totally reasonable, then you are also going to open yourself up to a lot of criticism.
You're hostage to it. Okay, let's go to Boris Epshteyn. Boris, Nikki Haley, the Hill newspaper today, first it was Nikki Haley whining, I'm not invited, I'm not loved, I can't go to the conservative thing. Then you got Liz Cheney, that brutal remark she made about the President of the United States yesterday with McCarthy. I think it's unacceptable. McCarthy did not call her out in front of the media, try to make a joke about it. And she went in for another hard hit. As Navarro says, she knows metaphorically, how to put the stiletto in between the ribs, and she's trying to cut up the president every chance she gets. Boris, give us your assessment on the eve of CPAC.
Steve, great to be with you and MAGA Nation and MAGA Brain Trust, that is the War Room's listeners and viewers. On the eve of CPAC, this is President Trump's Republican Party. It is President Trump's MAGA movement, and President Trump continues to be the leader of this country. Joe Biden is nowhere to be found and nothing to speak of. So that is what's happening going into CPAC. This is going to be a celebration of MAGA. Liz Cheney is not welcome. Nikki Haley is not welcome. And by the way, if you're not welcome at CPAC, Nikki Haley, how are you going to win any primaries in 2024 when you're trying to run for president? It's not it's an inauspicious start to her campaign for 2024. Let's put it this way. Not great when the Republican Party continues to be overwhelmingly in favor of President Trump. We know Trump voters, even after over 2-month beatdown by mainstream media, 76% of Trump voters would vote for him for the nomination 2024, 85% for the general. Those numbers are going to grow. So there's no room for Nikki Haley in this party. Liz Cheney, yes, the Cheneys are maybe good at shooting people in the face, but Liz Cheney doesn't seem to have very good political instincts there. I'll tell you that. Because
hold on. Hang on. I just want to make sure I got something. We're going to hold you over through the break just for a minute, but I got to ask you something. You just made a statement I don't think I've heard anybody say. You just said, and you're one of the senior MAGA guys, you just said you don't think there's room in this party for Nikki Haley, not for Liz Cheney. You don't think there's room in this for Nikki Haley. Why? Is it because she's too much of a globalist? She's too much of an elitist? She doesn't understand the basics of the MAGA movement, the economics of it, the politics of it, the contours of it. Why do you say there's not room? Because that's going to be, Mediaite's going to have that up. Boris Epshteyn says not room in Republican Party, of Trump Republican Party for Nikki Haley. So what say you, sir?
Because you can't go with the wind. You've got to be authentic. You've got to be real. You've got to stand for what the Republican Party stands for. And what you can't do is on one day say, I'm with President Trump and he made me the UN ambassador, then try to lambast President Trump before the last few days of the impeachment trial when you thought things were going badly, then ask to go visit President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. It just that doesn't make for a leader in today's Republican Party. And I don't think there is room for people who are trying to be, have their thumb in the air and feeling the wind and going with the wind and the weather. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for leaders. We're looking for authenticity. We're looking for people who want to put America first and not their political prospects first.
She's
and
a
frankly,
phony.
I don't think Nikki Haley's shown anything that tells us that she's a true leader in our party.
You're saying the party doesn't need any more phonies. It's got enough phonies hanging around.
Yeah. I mean, people are looking for. I think the word that Boris just said is absolutely right. It's authenticity. Yeah. It means we don't want phonies. We don't want people who are going to pretend to be with us, pretend to support the president, and when the first opportunity gets, they throw the president under the bus like she has done and others.
Yeah, our back's already full of holes. I'm sick of getting stabbed in the back. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Boris, hang on. Short commercial break. We return. We got Boris Epshteyn. We're going to finish up with Boris. We got Peter Navarro. Then we got Corey Stewart. Just announced, I think, AT&T under pressure from Corey Stewart and Tucker Carlson in the War Room spun off DirecTV this afternoon. The pressure's going to come to spin off CNN. We'll be back in the War Room in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, we continue our CPAC coverage. Before I get back to Boris, Raheem, Nikki Haley after Tim Alberta, and Tim Alberta is a wholly owned subsidiary of Team Mitch. Right, when he writes about the Republican Party, it's always through the establishment eyes. That's why his book sold like 9. His book sold, I think, 9 copies. I don't think it broke into double digits. Sold 9. Spent years of his life, got a nice advance, sold 9 copies. Because he's always given the establishment's point of view. She complained after that article in Politico, which was her own words on the record. Which trashed the president. And by the way, I brought up that she did the same thing before the 18 vote in October, right? It's 4 weeks before the election. She says, hey, I'm out of here. Or I'm out of here. Got to go. I'm not with him. Right? When I said from the Bloomberg conference, the hedge fund conference I was speaking at, she's ambitious as Lucifer. Is it the liberal media that was the problem she complained about, Raheem?
Well, I got to tell you, this, 20,000 word piece by Tim Alberta in Politico. I mean, it's
a long read.
It's an excruciating read, is what it is. Not least because it as you say,
it's a presidential profile.
But it's also her being hoist with her own petard in real time. You know, she's trying to have it both ways. And there's something that Margaret Thatcher said about standing in the middle of the road: is you get hit by traffic from both sides. And this is the thing. You can't pretend. You can't flub your way through being MAGA.
That's what Corey said. No phonies.
And at the same time, the final sign-off of this entire article is her dumping on the president, saying, he's not really a friend of mine. It's kind of Mean Girls' way of approaching the whole situation. Neither side are going to buy that. And she comes off this all the worse.
Boris, she's been stunned by the reaction, has she not? I mean, she's walking around a little shell-shocked, like in the NFL when you get hit first, right? She's still groggy. Right? She doesn't. I mean, she's so upset. And the Paul Singer apparatus that's in back of her is so upset she's not invited down there with the other potentials. Trump's going to win the nomination in 2024. But if he ever chose not to, you're going to have the Tom Cottons. You're going to have the Mike Pompeos. You're going to have the serious people are going to be there. What say you, sir?
It feels like both Nikki Haley and Liz Cheney are sort of like, we're thinking back to when I was a sophomore at the varsity football scrimmage. You know what I mean? You're in the big leagues now, and then you don't know whether you're coming or going. Great reference there by Raheem of Margaret Thatcher's comment of getting hit by traffic from both sides. What were they thinking? Do Nikki Haley, and this is probably what happens when you're a quote-unquote principal and you forget to actually look at the information. Maybe their staffs didn't tell them, hey, President Trump's got over 90% approval in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Hey, the MAGA movement is what got us there. They must have forgotten that.
No, but here's what's interesting. The Hill
happened, it was over.
Yeah,
total miscalculation.
Yeah, the buried lead in the Hill story was interesting. The buried lead said that she was surprised. She didn't know where the party had really shifted. She was so out of touch with the base. She thought this was a passing storm. They all thought Trump's going to go away. He's going to get humiliated on this thing. He's gone. He's down in Mar-a-Lago. I can make my move now, and I've got first mover advantages. I'm the one that really took on Trump. I'm the one that really said, he's not really up to leading us. He's not a leader. I can be the first mover advantage. It was a play that didn't work.
This is what happens when your only metric is how many email addresses did we gain today. That's it. I mean, Nikki Haley has been running an email marketing list for the last couple of years. That's it.
Remember she went to China? Just that thing, I'm going to China, just send a donation. Help Nikki take on Beijing.
I got one from it. Unfortunately, instinctively, I just deleted it. Otherwise, I'd read it to you. But this is all it is. Nikki Haley is an email marketing list.
Boris, is Raheem right? Is she running this thing like you're running a marketing campaign? She's lost touch with where MAGA is?
Of course. If you run an email marketing campaign, you actually know who your potential audience is, right? But what she's doing is doing something that isn't interesting to anybody. Now she's now blaming the mainstream liberal media after giving an interview the size of War and Peace to Politico, which last time I checked is pretty mainstream liberal media. That is total nonsense. It's like walking into a door and then blaming the door. It's very obvious what Nikki Haley was trying to do. It was another in a long line of political miscalculations. And I'll say it again: Nikki Haley is not a serious contender for the future of the Republican Party. President Trump will win the nomination. Will be the 47th president if he runs. If he doesn't run, there are other people
after being Speaker of the House in 2022.
True representatives of the conservative movement. Nikki Haley isn't one of them. She's much closer to Liz Cheney, who the party is left behind.
I want to jump before we get I got to get your social media coordinates, but I just want to reemphasize to our audience: no Pence, no Nikki Haley, no Liz Cheney, and no Mitch McConnell down in Orlando addressing the MAGA CPAC movement.
MAGA Central.
MAGA Central. Can we get what's your coordinates on social media, Boris?
No doubt about it. At Boris CP on Twitter. Boris_Epshteyn, Boris_EPSHTEYN on the gram. We're always coming in hot. There's going to be a lot of good postings on the gram coming up. At Boris CP on Twitter. God bless. Stay strong. Go MAGA.
Okay, thank you, Boris. I want to get everybody, by the way, the precinct committeemen. We had Dan Schultz on this morning. He's got the new site up, precinctstrategy.com. Go there now. We want to break the 10,000 mark today. We've been, I think 150,000 in the last 10 days since we've done it. You have 200,000 billets you got to fill that are open. Now I want to go to Peter Navarro. Peter, Boris said Orlando is a celebration of MAGA. Why is the chief economic strategist for the MAGA movement, for economic nationalism, for populism, why is the chief architect for President Trump of his policies that had record low employment with working class African Americans and Hispanics, middle class, had rising wages for African Americans and Hispanics and white working class? The architect that was you were the hammer when President Trump wanted to get things done with China, the CCP. We're going to be talking with Corey Stewart, the former acting Undersecretary of Commerce, about this entire AT&T fiasco. Why are you're currently at your studio? Are you flying down late tonight?
Yeah. So basically, I did get an invitation, but I said that unless I could go with Raheem and Bannon, I wouldn't go. So the three of us apparently are here in D.C.
Hold it. I've got a rule. I've got a rule that we're certainly too old. We're certainly too old for CPAC. So CPAC is a young person's game. But in your case, they got to hear your pearls of wisdom.
Yeah, indeed. But let me pierce this illusion propagated by my good friend Boris and a little bit of you, Bannon, that somehow CPAC is a celebration of MAGA. You haven't done your homework. I have. I looked at the speaker list, and I got a killer Venn diagram for your viewers to understand what's going on here. The concept of a Venn diagram is, what's at the intersection of CPAC and MAGA, and very clearly, it's deregulation and tax cuts, okay? Both CPAC and MAGA folks, they love deregulation and tax cuts. But if you look at the MAGA side of the Venn diagram, you've got economic nationalism versus globalism on the CPAC side. You've got fair trade versus free trade on the CPAC side. And you got secure borders on the MAGA side. And you got open borders on the CPAC side. And Steve, look, when I was in the administration, I showed up there 1 year. And look, these folks are not MAGA friendly for the most part. Let's strike that.
Well, hold
from
it.
your
The audience,
idea.
the grassroots audience says you're saying some of the sponsors and the corporate sponsors, because the CPAC crowd is definitely the crowd's definitely a closed. They're not an open borders crowd. That's a closed borders crowd.
They're going to love Trump. No, I'm going to push back on. Love Donald J. Trump, okay? But if you mingle with those folks, I'm telling you, Steve, and if you look at the guest list, look at, forget the corporate sponsors. Look at who's going to be speaking, okay? And for every Bob Lighthizer you got there preaching the gospel of fair trade and tough on China, you got people that represent like the Heritage Foundation. It's a celebration of globalist free trade. Trust me on that. Might explain why I'm not there, you're not there, and Raheem's not there. So I think, look, let's not forget what this is all about. The next 2 and 4 years are about a battle royale within the Republican Party to keep that party together, cohesive, but remake it in MAGA image for Donald J. Trump. And if you're going to do that, you can't have the CPAC globalists. You can't have the CPAC free traders. You can't have the CPAC open borders. That's just not
hang on. Give us
yin and yang here. The Venn diagram doesn't make it.
Give us the 2 or 3 points you would make that says, hey, this is economic populism, this is economic nationalism, this is MAGA. What are they?
Blue-collar, working-class America is the heart and soul of this country, just as manufacturing is. We have no national defense without a strong manufacturing base. Economic security is national security. Tariffs are simply a tool to protect us from the unfair trade and mercantilism of Europe and the militaristic attacks of communist China. And these folks have to get on the MAGA train. this whole free trade, globalism, open border stuff, it basically punishes the American people. If you care about America and the working class of America, get on the MAGA train, and then that Venn diagram will be a circle. Okay? But right now, this is what it looks like, Steve. Take a good look at this, because that's a Venn diagram that shows the split between CPAC and MAGA. We've got to make that a circle, not a Venn diagram.
Okay, you're talking about the hardcore. Nikki Haley and them are not even invited, and Navarro said we got to be harder than that. Okay, well, Dr. Navarro wants you to hang around. You're going to be here for the next segment. Corey, you were Undersecretary of Commerce. Is Dr. Navarro correct?
Yes, he is. I mean, Trump did something in 2016 that Barry Goldwater did in 1964, which is to create a movement. It was really the beginning of a movement. But he also did something that Goldwater didn't do. He got elected president in the beginning of the movement. But we have to remember that we're still toward the beginning of this movement. The battle is still going on for the heart and the soul of the Republican Party. Eventually, MAGA wins, blue collar wins. That is where this party is going, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay, Navarro, hang on. We're going to take a short commercial break. We'll return with former Undersecretary of Commerce, Corey Stewart. We're going to blow up AT&T in the next segment. They're dealing with, in partnership, the Chinese Communist Party. Next.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, live chat's blown up about your analogy to Goldwater. Walk through that again quick, because we got to get to AT&T. What's going on? What's this concept about
Barry Goldwater created the modern conservative movement in 1964. He's defeated soundly by LBJ, and the first real Goldwater, true conservative president that we had was 16 years later with the election of Ronald Reagan. Now, you had he had Watergate in the middle of that, so that kind of lengthened the transition. But the point is that when you create a movement, it takes time. It takes time to fully get implemented. It takes time to get power. It takes time to root out the ancient regime. And that's what we're seeing. We got Mitch McConnell in there. We got all kinds of Mitch McConnells in the Senate and the House that have to be rooted out before we take control of the party and before we can actually fully implement the Trump agenda.
Raheem, concept.
Well, I'm a massive Goldwater fan to the point where, I have been, even when I was living in Britain, Goldwater, reached across the ocean to me as a figure. I went to Prescott, Arizona to stand on the steps where he gave his speech announcing his run for president in 1963. They have the plaque there. Just an incredible figure, still an incredibly important figure. I've read and consumed almost everything about him. I even have a catalog of his Arizona desert photography that his son actually gave me. And the reason for all of that is Donald Trump. There are obviously ways in which they differ massively, but just like Donald Trump, here is somebody who came along and there was no pale pastels as far as these people were concerned. He set his eyes on the prize. He knew exactly what conservatism meant contemporaneously and how it should be formed in the future, and set his eyes on that target and went for it.
How would he play today? Extremism in the defense of liberty is justified. How would that play today in the mainstream media?
And moderation in terms of cowardice is no virtue, right? And that would be called insurrectionism.
And he'd be an insurrectionist.
Every movement has its day. Look, that movement is old. It's gone. It's going bye-bye. What we're doing now is we're transforming the Republican Party into the working man's party, a party of traditional values, of fair trade, bringing back manufacturing.
Okay, but you talk about you were acting undersecretary under Wilbur Ross. Let's talk about AT&T. Yeah. Tucker did a good job last night, but AT&T came right out and dumped on him right afterwards. There's the developments today. Tell us what the real story is.
Yeah, so the real story is that we are all set to place China Telecom on the entity list, place sanctions on them.
What does that mean for our audience?
It means that
China Telecom's owned by the CCP, and they're basically an agent of the Chinese Communist Party.
That's right. But the reason that a company's placed on the entity list is the reason you put a sanction on them is because they're somehow threatening U.S. national security or they're involved in supporting human rights abuses. In the case of China Telecom, they fit both of those criteria. They continue to aid the Chinese government. They're using cell phones, cell phone service and telecommunications technologies to track trace, identify the Uyghur population. This is a Muslim minority population, Western China. They spy with them on them using that. Then they round them up, send them over to concentration camps where they're raped, they're tortured, and there's a lot of reports
So clearly AT&T can't be in business with them, can't be in partnership with them. They should be on the entities list, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why is this even a question? Then why is this not happening, or why are they able to spin this? When Tucker reports it, they go, oh, no, you don't really understand the story.
Because the answer to that is the establishment is still in control. The establishment is still in control. Even during the Trump administration, they were still pulling the levers, right?
Hang on. Navarro, you tell me, Corey Stewart, as acting undersecretary, said the establishment is still in control. You told me and swore to me that you guys had the establishment under control. So what's right? Is Corey Stewart right? They're still there? Or is Dr. Navarro? Dr. Navarro told me every day he had them. No, you told me you backed him off.
Look, I don't know where to start here. Let's start with the Department of Commerce. Like Eric Branstad, the son of the ambassador to China, right? He works at Commerce. He leaves, sets up a consulting firm to lobby on behalf of communist China and Huawei and ZTE. So clearly the Department of Commerce didn't have that under control. I don't know if Corey did.
But we did put, by the way, but hang on, Trump's Commerce Department put more companies on the entities list than every other administration combined.
That is true.
But why couldn't you take on the AT&T? Why couldn't you take on the AT&Ts? By the way, the reason I want to do this story is AT&T. My dad and grandfather worked for the phone company for 100 years combined. However, CNN does not report this story. It's owned by AT&T. This is the corruption. They're in business with the Chinese Communist Party. They're in business with China Telecom. They're trying to make sure they're not on the entities list because they have a big impact. You don't see CNN reporting that.
Steve, look, hang on. I think you're having amnesia about the 6 months you spent in the West Wing. I think you and I understand better than the whole world out there that there was just as many people within the West Wing that we had to fight as outside the West Wing. And so if you're wondering about the entities list, I mean, that thing took much longer than it should. And one of these days, I'm going to name some names, but suffice it to say that we had a lot of trouble. And there were lobbyists like Branstad. I mean, think about that. For the Chinese ambassador,
I got former governor of Iowa. Did you get pressure? Did you get pressure from the Republican Party, donors and all that, to make sure that companies like AT&T, and they were all over you, that it wasn't exposed that they were actually in business with CCP-controlled companies?
Is that a question for me? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's, you got to remember AT&T contacted us, myself and the Secretary Ross, by none other than Ed Gillespie. Ed Gillespie's the former chair of the RNC. Ed Gillespie's a prominent Republican, but he's a member of the establishment. This is not even a Democrat-Republican issue. This is pressure from the establishment placed on every member of every administration. It's very, very similar, with similar results. We were just at the cusp of actually taking control, I believe, over the establishment. There's going to be big changes inside the Trump administration in term 2. That didn't happen. It's unfortunate. But now we're going to have to wait several more years for that to happen.
Peter, this place...
Amen here, Steve.
Yeah.
Let me just reiterate that.
Yep.
Let me reiterate that. That's why we needed a second term.
Yep.
We had gotten to the point where we went through 4 years and we were just steadily getting rid of the globalist flotsam and jetsam whirling around the West Wing. We had it all set up for the CCP agenda. We were going to decouple from China. That was going to get done. We were going to finish the wall. We were going to get a merit-based use of immigration policy. That's this second term that we lost is just an incredible loss to this nation, not just because we lost that opportunity, but because we went from the yang of a tough, MAGA, blue-collar, working-class policy over to this yin Biden sleepy time kind of like blow open and stick it to blue-collar America.
Hang on. The borders are open and the schools are closed. That sums up Joe Biden. I want to go back to Corey just for a second. You heard Navarro talk about the second term. As far as Biden goes, given the direction of the Trump administration of this confrontation with the Chinese Communist Party, full on in both information warfare, economic warfare, and saying, hey, you don't own the South China Sea. It's an international waterway, militarily around the Eurasian landmass. what do you see the Biden administration? They've wanted to back off, but they can't back off. You see, Rasmussen today, the American people support a confrontation. When you hear they saying, oh, we want to outcompete them, as former acting Undersecretary of Commerce, how do you assess the Biden administration's first month in office regarding the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I think that they want to be easy on China. They want to be soft on China. That's where they're going. They feel themselves as kind of, if you think about what they're doing, they're curtailing free speech. They're working together with private industry. This is similar to what the Chinese have been doing over the last, since 1946. So I think the problem is, and you put your finger on it, and so did Peter, and that is they know that the American people don't want to go there. They want the Biden administration to be tough on China. The working class wants to be tough on China, but they can't go there as long as we continue to expose it. And by the way, one of the last things we did in the Trump administration was to try to shed light on this, put as much press attention on it as possible so that they couldn't stick it back into the closet once they took power.
This is the thing with genocide and everything. Okay, real quick.
Steve, can I make a quick point here?
Sure.
Because I want to cycle right back to the CPAC problem, right? We've talked a lot about with this idea I call idea laundering. That is to have the big corporate elites give a bunch of money to these think tanks, or Peterson Institute, Brookings, whatever it is, and what they do is they launder this idea that free trade and open borders is good for the American people. And guess what? There's going to be a lot of idea laundering at CPAC by those people in those think tanks.
Okay.
So this is the problem we face. The establishment versus blue-collar America, that's what this battle is going to be about. And the president has to stay true to this. He's got to not only cleanse the party, but he's got to cleanse the folks that are around him to make sure that he stays signal, no noise.
Okay, we got a couple of minutes left. I got to get to this quick. I'm going to start with Corey. This concept that came up with on Larry Kudlow's show yesterday with Pillsbury, that, hey, the super hawks want to decouple, but you got to be practical. You're going to have to work with these guys. Are you a believer that we confront the Chinese Communist Party and go through a decoupling of the economies?
Absolutely, yes. Look, we are in a Cold War. Those of us who lived through the Cold War don't want to go through another Cold War. We thought that we were entering a whole new time and era in 1988, 89. We are in a Cold War with the Chinese. They're trying to destroy us. They want to, remake the world. They want to control it. We have to accept that fact, and we have to confront them.
Okay, Peter, this weekend, for everybody in the audience, when you see the CPAC speeches, you make your own mind up. It's live streaming. You can watch it. Real America's Voice, watching Real America's Voice, wall-to-wall coverage. Peter, what are the two reports? The one on the stealing of the election, which the president's going to address on Sunday. Also about the border, which the president's going to be the center part of his speech on Sunday. How do people get both reports from Peter Navarro so they can read them and make their own minds up about the speakers? They make their own Venn diagram up of what they think of the speakers are at CPAC.
Easiest thing to do in the world, peternavarro.com, just my website, peternavarro.com. You can download both of those reports. And again, I carefully went over the speakers and the panels and all of that. And there's really no credible person there to present the receipts.
Okay,
it's very, very interesting.
There's seven panels. There's seven panels on voter integrity. We'll get to that tomorrow. Dr. Navarro, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Corey, what are you doing now? How can people get more access to you?
Well, I'm back in my legal practice. I do international trade work, and I do rezonings. And
are you going to run for governor against McAuliffe?
No, hell no. Look, I had.
Have you endorsed? Are any of these guys MAGA right now, or enough MAGA?
No. None of them is really MAGA. I mean,
Okay, Corey. How can there's a state, Commonwealth of Virginia, my home state? Corey ran for you ran for the Senate, right?
You ran for governor and then Senate. Yeah.
Okay, how come there's not? How can we have a field that doesn't have MAGA in it?
Because the establishment is trying to tell us that because I was MAGA and I lost, therefore the way to win in Virginia, the way they won is to go back to the establishment.
Is that
Absolutely.
true?
It will not work. We're in a totally new era. People thinking they go back in time when we're used to win in Virginia. Look, we're losing in Virginia because partially we're putting up candidates who don't stand for anything, who don't believe in anything.
We're not MAGA enough.
We're not MAGA enough, in my opinion.
Corey Stewart, acting Undersecretary of Commerce under Wilbur Ross for President Trump, and he understands China. He's anti-CCP. He gets it. we got a long fight ahead of us on China, don't we?
We do. This is going to take decades. This is not something that's going to be solved in 4 years or 8 years, or it's going to take a long time.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we return, we got
got breaking news as well,
Hit
which
me.
we'll tell you after the break. But I just got a message back from Twitter about my suspension.
Okay, everybody's hanging on. I'm sure that was related to the confirmation hearing today. Okay, commercial break. We get back. Drew Mason, he's in the gold business during the day, but he's the prayer and fasting guy. Otherwise, he returns to the War Room next.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
The second hottest podcast in the nation is Raheem Kassam's, our co-host here on War Room Pandemic. Tech oligarchs have been all over you, Raheem. What's going on? Give us an update.
Yeah, so finally I get a response. I mean, it's been about a year since I've got a response from Twitter, but finally I got a response today, and I think it's because of a lot of audience pressure. A lot of people have been taking it upon themselves to directly get in touch with people at Twitter HQ over a suspension applied to my account last night with no further rationale. Here's what we learned today from Brandon Borman at Twitter. He says it's a temporary locking of your account for violating the rules on civic integrity. Specifically, this tweet attached, "That's all I have, thanks." And he's attached a tweet from 9 days ago where I write, "Steal an election, militarize the capital, persecute opposition, seize civilian arms. Biden and Harris are running the playbook of every modern dictator, and most people are too blind to see it."
That's a brilliant tweet. They took it down for that about free speech. Good Lord. Okay, the day of reckoning is coming, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of day of reckoning, I want to bring in Drew Mason from stjosephspartners.com. He is the head of this national movement about getting America to both pray and fast. He runs Fasting for America. Drew, I got to ask you a question. You told me this when we first came on a couple of weeks ago about the story about in the New Testament about prayer and fasting. Can you tell our audience the story?
Yes, thank you so much, Steve, for this wonderful opportunity. And I just want to convey to people the hope and optimism of what the Lord is doing, contrary to what the many headlines are you read. In Matthew and in Mark, for centuries, the scriptures were the same, and they told the story of when the apostles went out, they were victorious, except when they came across evil. They couldn't be victorious. Jesus came in, rescued them, and they said to him afterwards, "Lord, why didn't we have victory here?" And he said simply, because this is a special case, that is when evil is present, that requires prayer and fasting. So for centuries, all the texts said that. However, in the early 60s, there was a dramatic change in the Bibles, and Mark 9:29 no longer says the word fasting. It really obliterated the teaching. And it's even more dramatic in Matthew 17. Verse 21 has been removed. So sequentially, the Bible literally goes from Matthew 17, verse 20 to 22. 21, that spoke of the power of fasting, has been taken out. I don't think the significance can be overemphasized because we've essentially been taking on water, bailing feverishly to stay afloat. And Jesus was telling us this is the patch that we need that will be victorious. Now, you should know, Steve, that some people are going to talk to this about with their pastors, and they'll hear the argument, well, we found an older textbook, an older manuscript, and that one older manuscript didn't have fasting, and that was the justification, because evil never admits it's wrong. It just screams louder and pushes back. But the reality is we have thousands of manuscripts, thousands of ancient manuscripts, and approximately 90+% that have this verse all say fasting. So clearly, all of the prophets, the apostles in those days knew that fasting was critical. We definitely have evidence.
I want to be clear here. There was a certain type when the disciples went out. There was a certain type of demon they couldn't obliterate, and he said that this intensity, these types, can only be confronted by prayer and fasting, and they got it. And you're saying that was for millennia, from the 60s all the way of AD or 100 AD all the way into the 1960s. It was prayer and fasting. And then either Second Vatican Council and in the Protestant Church, when they start to modernize these Bibles from King James Version to some modern vernacular, the "and fasting" was dropped in this two specific cases. Is that your point?
That's exactly right, Steve.
And so, and this is one of the things that you're trying to do and reinvigorate the faith here in this country, regardless whether you're Catholic or an evangelical Christian, is to have people both prayer and fast. We got a couple minutes. Walk through the program that everybody in the audience that you guys do, I think, on Wednesdays and Fridays. Walk through what you do.
Gladly. So we have clear evidence first century Christians felt obligated to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays. So we do it the way they did, bread and water, which is actually surprisingly easy. So we eat 100% whole grains, so the health aspect of it is very positive. So if you're hungry, you have as much whole grain bread as you want. If you're thirsty, you have as much water. You're just making the tiny sacrifice of limiting your intake and not having what you enjoy the most. This allows you to have the strength to do this week in and week out. And the key is our heart, Steve. It's just to say to the Lord, Lord, you made big sacrifices. This is just a tiny sacrifice, but I gladly do it for you, Lord, for your kingdom. And we implore you, renew our country, protect our country, pour out your blood upon us and give us the victory. And with that little heart and just a small number, the power is incredible. I want to share with you a story for your audience, Steve, if they weren't aware of this. But in World War II, Britain was basically on its deathbed, and it looked like Nazi Germany was going to deliver the knockout punch. And a small group of Brits, many of them elderly who thought their best days were behind them, many of them, obliterated, injured, they began fasting, standing on the biblical stories of how time and again, when a civilization fasted, God responded and miracles ensued. Now, I can't obviously prove that was the cause, but shortly thereafter, Hitler made the greatest blunder in military history, reversed out of Western Europe and Britain and went into Russia, and it was the beginning of his demise. That's the type of story that's happened again and again. And the great news is you only need a small number of people to respond to unlock this power in their lives and their families and for our nation. And we believe, Steve, great news is coming. Great news is coming to our country.
Real quickly, Drew, how do people get to your website and how do they get to the fasting? We've got about 30 seconds.
The website is stjosephpartners.com. On the menu bar, it starts out gold, silver, platinum, palladium. On the right, you'll see Fast for USA. Can we pray for 10 seconds, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Heavenly Father, we praise you and thank you for all your blessings. In the sweet name of Jesus, we implore you to pour out your Holy Spirit upon our nation. Remove the scales from our eyes. We will see what is true. We will have a hunger for truth, and we will have the backbone to stand up and fight to restore our country to be a republic as you would have it, Christian and capitalist, into the greatest days of our existence. In the sweet name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Great. You're a real warrior, spiritual warrior. Okay, tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we're going to be back in the war room. We're going to be live. John Frederick starts at 6 o'clock in the morning. At 10 o'clock, we take up the live coverage with Real America's Voice. See you then. Tomorrow afternoon, 5 o'clock, real coverage. Raheem.
JoeAnon.com. We'll talk about that more in the morning.
10 o'clock. See you then.